2023, City of Ripon Police Commission meeting. First order of business is to call to order and roll call.
Mr.
Here.
Mr. Rosenau?
Here.
Mr. Richter? Here. Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Do we have to make note of other members present? Other?
Noted.
Good.
Noted.
You've had a chance to look at the approval for the minutes of January 17th meeting. If you looked them over and if you have questions, it'd be a good time to bring them up. If not, we'd look for a motion to approve the minutes of the January 17th meeting.
I make a motion to accept the minutes from January 17th.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Hearing none, a vote to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Citizen input is number 3 on the list, and I think we're okay with citizen input. Okay, item number 4 is Chief Wallner's request that we should consider the adoption of the rules and regulations for the City of Ripon Police Commission. And he's going to present some pointers on that as well, but I am assuming we all had the copy of that, and we went through it, we're familiar with it, a little background on where this came from. As a commission, by Wisconsin law, Ripon is required to have a police commission, and anything over 5,000 or 5,500 people has to have one. And they're citizens appointed by the mayor, and we are actually representing the citizenry for the police department. That being said, when I started on the commission, we were specifically told that, in particular, if there was a complaint for the police department, we should forward that complaint or that person to the police department. We should not be the one to initiate that. The only time the commission would get involved is if that could not be resolved between the department and whoever's doing the complaining. In 9 or 10 years, or 11 I've been doing this, I've never had anybody issue a complaint or request a complaint to me. But still, that was the way we were supposed to operate. I think things changed, in particular, maybe society in general, but anyway, there's also the possibility that somebody has a complaint, comes to us and says, I have a complaint about the police department, and you say, take it to the police department, and they say, I don't want to do that. So now it goes to the commission. And as far as I know, the commission does not have, or did not have, a template or a boilerplate policy and regulation on how to handle that. So that's where this rules and regulations comes in. So if that should happen, we have something in place to react to that. And that's where we are on this.
Lud, did you want to touch base on anything to do with this before I
Jump in? Yeah, no, this is, Bill talked to me some time ago about this concept, and historically, we've always taken it on a case-by-case basis. And, we had a James Corum, who was very well-known in the state of Wisconsin, would kind of assist us when we had citizens' complaints regarding officers and how they were handling, or they made specific disciplinary charges. Dave was very proactive when there were concerns. Bill has been the same, that they address concerns regarding officers and complaints internally when they can take care of them. Obviously, we had some situations historically where citizens felt aggrieved, and they then resulted in these proceedings coming before the police commission. Bill's idea that you codify or that you reduce to writing procedures, I think is a good one. Certainly the question of whether or not a citizen or a aggrieved complainant would have an issue with the chief, that is now being proposed in these rules and regulations, so there's a procedure. Historically, those kind of things were hopefully resolved between the mayor being the head of the chief and being responsible for the chief, and then working that out with citizens' complaints. We just, through the years, have been blessed to have great chief of police. This is really the bottom line. We had the situation, obviously, shortly before I became city attorney with the other chief. Previous chief. And that became very involved and very entangled. And so I think Bill's being proactive to say, let's make sure we know what everybody's responsibility is and not let this just happen by chance, if a circumstance would arise. Again, because I have the ability to work with two great chiefs, I have not had concerns, but Bill's point is well taken. Reduce it to writing, know what the procedure is. Certainly, the commission needs to know that they can access my office. I've been involved in lots of different capacities with these type of situations. So if you get a citizen that is aggrieved, approaches the commission, contact my office immediately. I can't represent the commission, but I can give you advice on how to proceed. And then if it comes down to where charges are going to be filed, I can lead you to the right people and make sure that that's properly set out, which is some of the materials that are in the guidelines that Bill has put together. So I am a proponent of doing this and moving forward. I'm comfortable with the materials as presented. It's an overview, and it just gives you something to fall back to. Again, and specifically, as Bill pointed out, there is no direct supervisory responsibility on the chief or handling complaints for the chief, and that's addressed in these materials as well. So I would encourage you to adopt it.
City administrator, do you have anything to add to that? Or?
No, I would just, I think any framework provided not only for this commission, but the public as well, to understand the process for these types of matters is incredibly important. I think that some of the comments previously about how policing has changed, interaction with the public and society in general, just being as transparent and open as possible. That's my only other comment, and having a framework in place is certainly better than having nothing at all at this point in time.
Thanks. Let me just kind of back up a little bit and explain where this concept is coming from and the discussion a little bit. So, City Attorney Wirtz did mention a subject by the name of James Coram, who helps with a lot of labor law, has helped the city with labor law issues, whether it's contract negotiations or discipline issues or whatever the case may be. He has walked or been involved with the city with those issues. Annually, his firm that he works for, Von Breesen, presents information at the Wisconsin Chiefs of Police Conference. They've presented issues about this several times over the last years. And this year, the very first thing that they presented to us was the concept of, if you have an issue that occurs, the first thing that, if they're called in to represent or to be involved in that, the first thing they're gonna ask for is what's your rules and regulations concerning the operation and how this works on these complaints. How do we resolve them? What's the procedures? You'll see in here that there's timelines, those type of things that need to be complied by. There's also information in here that we'll cover in a little bit about frivolous complaints and those type of issues. But they basically inform us that that's the first thing they're gonna ask for if they're involved in some type of litigation with officers or with the chief or with police commission. So, and we didn't have anything like this in place. So that was kind of a wake-up call. Secondary to that, and actually it occurred previous, but Captain Damstig had, you remember, attended Command College, which is a school devoted to administrative issues within police organizations. It's a lot of training. It's a high-level administrative training for law enforcement. during that during that training, he also was approached about this during that training, and they had lengthy discussions about this concept and the need to have this type of information in place. And he had come back and shared that with me, and we had lengthy discussions about that. We got some samples, they provided samples to us through that training, and we were able to work through that and kind of mold that for what we're looking at. If we look at what, you know, the issue that we discussed when the captain and I met was that really we had no formal guide or reference material for complaints that may come directly to a commission member. And what we were concerned about is if that happens, what do you know, not knowing what you should do. Okay, how you should direct that back to the police department. If it's against an officer, back to the, we have a process in place, we have policy in place to investigate and try to resolve those complaints that come in regarding officers' conduct or behavior or violation of the law, whatever it might be, use of force, any of those issues. So we have an investigative process that occurs within our policy. But it's important that those complaints come back to us for that first step. And this allows that to happen here and kind of gives some guidance as to why that's important in that process and how that needs to happen. Okay. There was really also no guide for you folks to follow. We've been very fortunate, you know, my predecessor and hopefully myself have, you know, we've got a certain standard that we want in our department. So we've been very fortunate that we haven't had a lot of issues come to you involving either discipline or aggrieved persons or whatever in the community. So, and we worked very hard at that. But the question then became, okay, what if that happens? Do you know what you're supposed to do? And, you know, it's nice that maybe we don't have those things occurring all the time, but then when they pop up all of a sudden, now it's like, okay, we're scrambling to try to figure out, okay, what do we do, how do we do this, what's the process here, what do you need to do? What we didn't want to get into was a situation where somebody would come in, file a complaint, and it end up in front of the commission, and now the commission is, after the complaint is in, now trying to establish rules on how they're going to process this event, how they're going to process this complaint. Now, there is some statutory language that helps guide you through that, but what we didn't want to have happen was a complaint come in and then it be perceived that we were then making up rules after that complaint came in as to how we were going to handle that based on, you know, what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So we want to try to avoid that impression that there's something not right going on behind the scenes. So, and this helps with that. The other thing that this does is if you get into a position where you've got a question about something, you'll have a copy of this whenever a police commission member starts. I'm sure, you know, in conversation we've probably had with some members, it's like you start and you sit at the table and it's like, okay, how do we do this? Well, I think we remember we did this, right? How do we do that? Remember we're supposed to. So this helps with that. It helps set up those guidelines for you as commission members on your responsibilities. If you're elected to a position within the commission, what your responsibilities are as well, and how meetings are conducted and those type of things. So it's really a reference material for you. If we get into a situation where we need some guidance, you just pull this off the shelf and it's there and it's ready for you to review and you can find out what you're doing. Okay? So that's kind of the background here and why we had this initial discussions about this internally and why we thought it was important to come to you. Certainly I've talked to the city administrator and the city attorney in reference to this information, and we had lots of discussions about it and before it even got to this point. But if you want, let's just walk through a couple things I just want to point out in reference to the rules and regulations so that, you know, there's some understanding of where we're at and what we've got here. So pages 1 through 3 are basically establishes guidelines for each of the officer positions within the commission. So it outlines what the president's responsibilities are, the secretary, the vice president, those type of things. So if you get appointed to one of those spots, you kind of understand what you're getting into and what your responsibilities would be, okay? You'll see that there is some leeway on some of those, you know, when it comes to, for example, like a press spokesman, you can,
I can't hear you.
you can, you know, assign that to the city administrator, you know, those type of things. It gives you some guidance on helping you with that. You know, we understand that, you know, you guys may not, you know, deal a lot with like the press or with, you know, things like that, so you may need some help with that. So, you know, it gives you some ability to do that and to reach out for help if you need it. And then just has some other responsibilities for you. Page 4 designates the correspondence address for the commission. We're gonna talk about why that becomes important later. We'll talk about, you know, process serving within the document when it comes to, there's certain things that have to be done when it comes to serving complaints or information to the commission that needs to come in, or a return of complaint information. You know, people will be asking, well, where do I send this? Well, do I send it to your house? Do I send it? This establishes where that needs to go and all the legal processes for that. Okay? Then we start to define certain terms, you know, through pages 4, 5, 6 is blank, 7, really defines certain things, gives those definitions of you know, behavior. Categories of complaints are included in there on page 5, whether it's use of force, being discourteous, treatment, violation of procedure, or department services, those are all.
Is your page 6 empty?
Page 6 is empty, yep. Okay. Pages 7 and 8 talk about the eligibility list for hiring. Now, we've always had an understanding on how that works, right? And how that process evolves, and we've had conversations about that. But this puts that to language. So if anybody ever has any questions, well, how does this work? What, you know, what do we do? It's always been, well, yep, this is how we always done it, and, you know, it's just been kind of a word of mouth thing passed on from either the chief to the commission or from commission member to commission member, but this designates that for you. Basically, it's the same thing that we're doing already. You guys, you know, we bring candidates to you, you interview them, you conduct an interview with them, and you give me an approval of a list back to me that are eligible to be hired. I pick off the list of who I want to hire. But it sets that out here on how that works. Okay? And then it talks, there's some other, on page 8, a little, you know, things about us keeping records in reference to that, our interview process and those type of things. Page 8 also talks about appointing an acting chief if something were to happen. So if I get hit by a car tomorrow and we are chiefless, or, you know, I have a medical thing or something happens where I need to take a leave, a family issue, this dictates how that process works. You know, the mayor is obviously involved with that, but it lays that out for you on how that appointment would work, rather than us trying to figure that out at the worst time when we need to be thinking about other things, okay? Page 9 talks about appointments for promotion. Again, that comes from an eligibility list. You'll remember that that's a process that we're doing now. This is just putting that into language. So if I have a promotional process within the department, I bring those candidates to you for approval on those promotions. So for sergeant or captain, any of those type of things. Okay? Also talks about suspension or discharging of the officer or the chief and how that process goes. And it also starts to talk a little bit on page 9 about the guidelines about processes to file a complaint against department personnel. And this is where you'll see on the very last paragraph there, they may file a complaint against police service personnel with the approved citizens complaint form, and that's according to our general policy. So it outlines our policy on how that process happens. Okay, so if somebody comes to you and wants to file a complaint, this is what you confirm them of, this is how that works.
And there is such a form.
Yep. That's part of it, it's built right into our policy.
Yeah.
So, and we actually supply them with a copy of the complaint form and a copy of the policy, which outlines the time frame and the process for them. Okay?
That's a very important point, and historically, that's how the whole thing starts. Is you gotta have the form's gotta be complete, it's gotta be signed. And so you're not just dealing with somebody saying, hey, I got a problem. And we've had that in the past where people are out moping around. You force them to file a complaint.
So page 10 then talks about, again, that process for complaints and discipline, and now we're getting into our time limit issues. So there's certain time limits that are applied, and those are all defined in the statutes, and how that works, and when those complaints need to come in, when that process needs to be done. Additionally, this also starts to talk about the filing of charges against an employee, so against an officer. So if I have an officer that's engaged in conduct that I believe that officer should be disciplined for or terminated for, I can't do that. I need to file charges and bring those charges to you for you to review. It outlines how that works. So it talks about the formal disciplinary process in order to fulfill my requirements for that process. It's got to be in writing, it's got to be addressed to you, who the charges are against, all of those things. Okay? Page 11, 12, 13, 14 talks about that discipline hearing process then. It outlines the charges process. Note that there's a time limit, there's time limits that are included within that language about delivering certain things within 10 days, proof of service, all of those things, initial hearings, all of those guidelines. So that's kind of included in those pages. You'll see on page 12, it talks about, once you have that initial hearing, if it gets to that point, there are some grounds in which exist in which you can dismiss charges. So these would be, let's say somebody files a charge and then they don't appear for the hearing, okay? Or there's charges that are related to a criminal or administrative issue that's happening, or a failure to comply with the rules that have been done here. If, go on to page 13, things like charges are trivial or frivolous or not made in good faith. If any of the allegations have been determined to be false, any of those things. Because right now, there's not a process. If somebody was to come to you and say, file a complaint against the chief and say the chief is housing zebras in his basement and I want to file a complaint about that, there's nothing, you have nothing right now that guidelines you, that allows you to just dismiss that outright because it's a frivolous or non-valid complaint. This allows you to do that, okay? So it outlines all of those things in which, you may be able to dismiss things or to proceed with certain charges, okay? And you can kind of take a look at those. If there's a civil action, obviously, if somebody comes to you and says, I want to sue the police chief, or I want to sue an officer, and I want $120,000, you can't award that type of, that's not something in your purview, so that, something like that is included in here as something that you couldn't, that has to be handled in a different setting, a different court, so, but it lays that out. Okay? Page 15 talks about then the hearing procedure. Obviously, it talks about our meetings too, being open meetings, your elections for your officers. It talks about your quorum that you need to have. It also kind of outlines, sometimes we may have questions about how should a meeting progress. Here's an example of how that should be done under that 10.06. Your, just like we did tonight, your roll call, your minutes, your correspondence, just those things that we're already doing, but this outlines for it. So when you've got that new secretary, or president that are putting together those agendas, they kind of have a guide here on what that should be like.
I have a question on
Sure.
10.01. Meetings shall be held not less than quarterly.
Yeah, and,
We've never met quarterly.
right, yeah, and we can certainly adjust that. There is some guidelines for that.
I think it is.
The
Yeah,
handbook for Wisconsin Police and Fire Commissioners, frequency of commission meetings, so the state law does not specify how often a commission must meet. The frequency of meetings is usually determined by the commission's need to discharge its duties. We've been operating under twice a year, at least. I bet we average 3 or 4 because of other meetings that come up. But we've been going every 6 months.
So let's amend that to semi-annual.
What?
Semi-annual. Let's
Yes.
make it
shall be
semi-annual.
held semi-annual.
Twice a year you meet,
So we're gonna change that, right?
Yeah.
minimum.
And then scheduled by the president with the consent of at least 2 other members, so, like John said, there comes times where we have to have frequent meetings, like we're
And
gonna.
I think those meetings count towards our yearly or annual meetings, but we have 2 that are, we have been having 2 for the sake of meeting.
16, 17, 18, and 19 are basically, for lack of a better term, they're kind of like the rules of evidence and procedures in reference to hearings. What type of evidence can come in, the testimony of witnesses, that the person accused of any type of wrongdoing has the opportunity to be represented by counsel. All of those things that need to be done legally to make sure we're in compliance with labor law and anything in regards to the hearing. There's a lot of information here. Certainly, you know, with that amendment, I would encourage you to take a look at it, and if you have anything, you know, I know you have another meeting, we have another meeting probably going to be coming up shortly. If you want, I can make, if there's any other changes anybody wants to discuss, we could probably make those. I can make the amendments, and you can add that on for a quick vote at your next meeting, or certainly you guys can open it up for discussion or questions or anything that you've got. So, but this is my suggestion on where we're at right now.
I think the proper order of events is to have a motion to adopt this and a second, and then discussion.
Okay.
And then what?
Discussion, if there is any, which there should be, because we have to do at least one amendment to it. So after the chief's input, administrator, and the attorney, and we've had 2 weeks to look this over ourselves, they've had this for 2 weeks. I would entertain a motion to adopt this.
I would so move.
I have a question for, why would we be adopting it and not the city and the city council?
That's
Good question.
That's-
This is a specific entity that is established by the state of Wisconsin. You are a separate body, distinct and independent of the city council. So your authority is derived by statute to you as a body. So the city council has no control over your business whatsoever. Now, you may, from time to time, ask that somebody from the city give you input into a topic area, but we, the common council, do not control the police/fire commission, in this case, police commission. You're independent politic, meaning you have the responsibility to oversee the department. The mayor is the head of the chief. Ultimately, you as a body are responsible for the police department in the city of Ripon. So no one else can adopt these regulations, only you. Good question.
I get one every now and then.
Okay, the motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And now we have discussion. Thinking that there should be one amendment to the frequency of meetings, which was on page, oh boy, I think it was 15. Should amend that 10.01 parent A. The commission shall hold semi-annual meetings at City Hall, which shall be held semi-annual meetings at City Hall,
Yep.
as well as other meetings as deemed necessary.
Do you adopt it and then amend it?
I think so.
Well, you
Or-
motioned it, and now you have a motion, the motion on the floor is to adopt it.
Yeah, yeah.
You can go with a friendly amendment, is how I've done it historically. So a friendly amendment is to make that change to that language. If that's accepted by the mover and the seconder, then you can move it forward as a total document.
Okay.
So is that acceptable to the mover
Yes,
and the
yes.
seconder? Okay,
Yes.
now it is officially
Okay.
semi-annually.
Okay, so is there any other discussion? I'd like to call for a vote right now. All those in favor of adopting the rules and regulations for the City of Ripon Police Commission with a friendly, what'd you call that?
A friendly amendment.
A friendly amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Very good. I'll make those amendments, and then I will give copies to you at your next meeting.
Item 5 on the agenda is the consideration of Chief Wallner's request for an employee performance evaluation. A little history that I can share, and I'm sure you can add to this probably better than I can, but again, in being on the commission for 10 or 11 years, we've never done a review on the chief of police. And I think for a couple of reasons, that would be a good idea. Number one, just for the sake of continuity and having a track record of doing an evaluation. Secondly, I think it would be good for the chief's, I don't know if I'll use the word resume, but for the chief's file for his background. So with that, I did hand out copies of a performance evaluation, which you probably haven't had a chance to look at, but it's, I can't say boilerplate. It's actually very similar to another municipality's performance evaluation. And thinking that that could be open for discussion. I guess.
I have a question. Where are we authorized to do an evaluation? I don't find it any place in the handbook for Wisconsin Police and Fire Commissioners. I don't find it anything in writing that we have. So how, I guess we assume that responsibility, but it's never happened, and probably because it's not codified anywhere, not written down.
But Attorney Wirtz did say that we're the ones that are responsible for the police department and the chief in
Okay.
particular.
I agree.
Yeah,
And
it's
I'm
under the
assuming,
general-
where else would it come from?
Yeah, exactly. It's the general
But
under the umbrella of you being a police commission, you can adopt a procedure to examine the chief in the sense of, are there any concerns or situations that you should be aware of, and therefore ultimately the mayor should be aware of, that may call into question his service to the city. So it's kind of a preventative medicine approach, because you're right, it's not in here, but it's understood.
It's not
that-
addressed.
Exactly, you're not gonna
And they're
find
all-
it. And so clearly, you can say, we don't wanna do it, we don't wanna touch it.
Yeah.
You could do that. I think it's an interpretation of your duty to know that the department is functioning with a chief that is functioning. That's really what it amounts to. So it's gonna be very perfunctory, for certain. You don't have any discipline, right? Unless it's brought to your attention. You have no, you know, cut his salary? No. you can't do that, you can't cut his hours, you can't, unless there's charges, you can't get involved in it. So yes, it is perfunctory in nature, but there may be a overreaching value that you can say annually, we have a sit-down with some information with the chief to say his performance is satisfactory. That's really the concept.
And I'll just add that from an organizational perspective, we have an employee handbook. The chief follows some of that in there, and there are things in employee handbooks that say employees are supposed to be getting performance evaluations, and those can, generally across the board, they're done mostly out of my office. I don't have the authority, or the council doesn't have the authority to do that. So, just in talking to Chief Wallner about that process, what does it look like? What is best practice? How do we stay ahead of issues if there are some? Certainly just open communication. I don't think this is something that is, out of any red flag or issue. This is, again, just a good practice. And then frankly, from the perspective of what the city does control and how we are handling things financially, that is where the city council and myself and our team administratively put together a budget. When we're looking at salaries and things of that nature, just understanding that all employees are being treated in a similar fashion, and if there is a need to adjust a salary based on performance or give a merit-based pay increase to the police chief in particular, I would just request that there is some level of backing there to award those types of things based on if it's a recommendation or just a result of the overall evaluation.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the chief you have a great question, could say, I'm not doing it. Okay, I think the chief could say that. I absolutely do. He's appointed for life, subject to high crimes and misdemeanors. Is the only way you can remove a chief of police. And so, yeah, it's perfunctory for certain. I think Adam is a proponent for the reasons he stated. It kind of at least gives his role as the executive officer of the city of Ripon some sense of, gee, this is a chief that's doing what the chief should be doing in the eyes of an independent body. That's what it does, and there's nobody else. The mayor weighs in on that as well. The mayor can. He is the direct report of the chief. So the
I
chief
agree
needs
with
direction.
everything you've said.
Yeah.
And I think an evaluation on a regular basis is absolutely very important. I can't believe
It's not in there. Yeah.
that the League of
Yeah,
Wisconsin
it's never-
Cities doesn't
no.
address it
No,
whatsoever.
it's that idea that they're appointed for life, and you better come up
Wow.
with something pretty good to get rid of the chief.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to keep
Yeah.
law enforcement
Yeah,
separate
separate.
from running a city. And they
Yeah.
didn't want the chief to be kowtowed to a
Sure.
mayor or
Sure.
to a city administrator. So that's the
Sure.
point of having them appointed for life. So I think it is with the consent of the
Mhm.
chief. I think that is
Sure.
what you would read into the law. It would be with the consent of the chief, and the chief, I think, is consenting
Yeah.
to this oversight. So I think that's a good, great question, because it really is an important question. And the city administrator is advocating, would like to at least have that baseline. This chief is doing what we think chiefs should do. Because nobody else can
Yeah.
answer that question other than the mayor. And mayors come and go.
Well, this consideration came from the chief. He initiated it, so I'm going to assume that since he initiated it, it was his approval. And
Yes.
He's here.
also thinking, I think the most valuable information anybody can get from an evaluation would be from the people that deal with him frequently or more often than the police commission does. We
Yes.
have a great view of the police chief on our commission and what we do for the meetings, but we don't see him day to day. These people do. So I think the idea is to have city attorney, the mayor, the administrator, the police commission, surely we can have our input, but I think the most weight, the most valuable information would come from the people who deal with them every day. So that's why, thinking that we would have a list of the key people that Chief Wallner deals with, as well as the commission, do a performance evaluation in that respect.
Would you include the officers?
You know what?
Some?
I did not go that far. For some reason, I did not.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Would
say
you
no to
include
that. You would not.
community people with whom he has significant contact?
Well, we're,
School district?
Again, I think,
perfect example. Somebody deals with a school district because there's a lot of,
but I'd be careful to go outside of where we're at. And I think your
Okay.
question nails it, okay? This isn't to create some kind of witch hunt,
No.
okay?
No.
And it can get into that. You send your survey or whatever format to just whoever holds a position in the city, and they go, yeah, you know, the other day I was a little concerned about so-and-so stopped my son, and I talked to the chief, and the chief couldn't explain why they're enforcing the law up in Bury Park. Just something goofy. You don't need that. And again, if there was statutory authority that spelled out exactly what you're supposed to do, I'd feel, okay, fine, go wherever you want to go. I tend to agree with your question, that this is something that is more connected for this body to assist the city in an administrative level. So it should be within the city's administrative purview. I don't think you want to open it up to Tom, Dick, and Harry. That's my opinion.
and if we did, where would the line be drawn?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You say you
Right.
didn't talk to, you know, you can go on and on.
Right.
The library director, or you didn't talk to the wastewater treatment plant, because the other day he complained about something. I just think your role is well-defined. I think this is a voluntary exercise that we're engaging in. Keep it within the framework of people that interact with him daily and have a reason to know whether or not he's performing the duties of a chief for the city of Ripon. I think otherwise you're going to end up headed in a very difficult direction. That's my opinion.
So we were correct in thinking that the police commission has some value on our evaluation, but more importantly, our.
I think the three you identified is perfect. I really do. I think that's exactly how you want to proceed, given the lack of direct statutory authority. You're working within the purview that, yeah, we need to know whether this department is, the definition of police service. Is police service being taken care of in the city of Ripon? There's your definition right at the beginning. The words police service shall include all positions in the police department of the city of Ripon, which would include a chief. So police service is what you're aiming at, but let's not run too far afield with whatever format you're going to use. Keep it within people that are directly interacting with the chief on a regular basis. Pursue.
Yeah, when I brought this forward, just a little bit of input from myself, when I brought this forward, you know, again, I have no issue with an evaluation being done. I think those are important. We do evaluations every year on our people within the department. We've done that for a long time. So I believe they're important, as long as they're done truthfully. As I get towards the end of my career, I am hoping to set some things up for you that I have seen have been like, you know, these rules are an example of that. You know, we've never had that, that's why I want to see that done. This is another example. We've been very fortunate, as Lud has said, you know, I worked for a very competent and excellent police chief that did a lot for me in my career, and we, you know, didn't have any issues there. Hopefully I've done that same type of thing. But looking forward, you know, obviously we never know what's gonna happen. And if we start to establish this process now, if in the future, long time from now, hopefully, or hopefully never, if we have issues, this body will have the ability to address those in that evaluation process with these gentlemen or whoever's in their place. So So it's really about looking towards the future. It's about, you know, taking a step here and saying, you know, we really should be thinking about this, to give some insight here and just kind of be aware of that. You know, God forbid we should ever run into an issue, hopefully when I'm long gone, with a chief. But if we do, I think this helps.
Yeah, head it
Helps
off.
us, yeah.
And that is the proactive nature of it.
Yeah.
So there is a positive spin on this, that you do this, could head off where you get into,
Yep.
the chief needs to be removed for cause, which is the only way you can remove it.
Yep.
You could have talk through issues using your body to head off things that are expanding beyond,
Yep.
you know, something that could have been administratively handled.
And
And
I-
that's to the point of the city administrator.
Yep.
Could become completely at odds with the police chief, and this would at least be kind of a resource to say, hey, can you rein him in a little bit? You know, you work with him on this, you work with him on that. These are concerns that have developed over time.
Yep.
So it's a good point. It's a very good point.
And identifying these gentlemen, I think, is a proper way to go about that. Certainly, the city administrator and I talk daily about issues. City attorney and I talk sometimes daily, but several times a week on issues. Mayor, not as often, but we see each other, you know, quite a bit and have conversations when anything comes up. So if there's issues, he hears that and he addresses those with me too. So, but yeah, they are, those people that you have identified, I think I work most closely with on an administrative level. You know, they will be able to tell you things about the chief as far as how, you know, the city administrator will be able to tell you things about administratively what's happening in the organization. You know, if there's problems within, you know, the department, you know, I discuss those with the city administrator, so he, you know, sees how those things are going, and if there's issues there that need to be addressed, whether it's budget issues, you know, am I staying within my budget, is it financial, is it use of equipment, is it practices, whatever. Okay, the city attorney obviously deals with us on the legal matters, so if there's, you know, he's coming across a lot of cases where, excuse me, you know, he's seen some improper training or some deficiencies that he's constantly seeing in reports or cases that are coming across, he can relay that, you know, to you on that evaluation process.
Yeah, the
So-
rogue officer.
Yeah.
And again, that kind of heads off the need for this
Right,
formal investigative process. So
Right.
it's good stuff.
so,
Yeah, overall, I think it's the right thing to do. But keep it controlled. I just think anything else is not
mhm, yep.
statutorily authorized. Yeah, productive. There's a good word, not productive.
So the order of events here, I'm thinking, would be adopting or agreeing to use this form for an employee performance evaluation.
Are we talking about this one, or are we
No,
talking about?
No, this one, this one.
Okay.
You got that one, right?
I do, yeah.
Yep,
Can I see a copy of that? or-
sorry.
Boy, now he's getting picky.
What, did you want to see a copy of that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Adam and I were kind of talking, we'll just cross off what we don't like. We won't answer.
What is this one here? Is this what you guys?
These were kind of all, yeah, these were all samples. That's one that we give to our officers
Okay.
yearly. These were just kind of samples that
Okay.
came up, just to kind of get an idea.
And is this common amongst both departments of this size to have this? Or is this something that you came up with?
As far as for the chiefs,
Yes.
I'm not sure.
I asked around and I didn't get a lot of responses.
That's what kind of continues to concern me a little bit, since it's not mentioned at all by the whatever here in the big red book. And what we've seen, have we seen a form particularly for the chief's position from anybody?
No.
And so I want to go, well, what does anybody else in the state do? Anything? And maybe they don't. You know, I feel that I feel no guidelines in terms of where we're going, except, well, here's an evaluation form. And the league doesn't say anything, anybody. Is there a chiefs association in the state?
Yep.
Do they have
Yep.
any?
There's nothing on their website as far as evaluations for chiefs,
It's very strange,
so.
very strange to me.
You guys
Yeah,
got
and,
it.
and certainly,
This is, to me, this is very generic.
yep. Yep.
And I've been through evaluations, ran a statewide organization, and
Yep. And,
man, there was input,
yeah,
but
and certainly if it's something that you don't think is necessary right now, I certainly don't want to pressure you into that or have you make that decision. If you want more time to think about it, I can certainly reach out, on the chief's website. They have a question and answer forum, and I can send out a question to them and get a response from them before you move forward to see if it's commonplace or if they're getting that. I certainly can do that. That's not a
I
problem.
mean, it just, I don't know. That's just where I am. I'm sort of like, huh?
Yeah, and it's obviously an odd duck, just kind of, I'm kind of an odd duck too. My performance evaluation is done by an entire common council and mayor. So, in my previous community, the police chief had a contract. And in that contract, it said a performance evaluation would be done. Now, we were smaller, we weren't required to have a police commission, so the common council was in fact then in charge. And really, with the contract in place with that employee, what was able to do is get the performance evaluation done and then discuss salary and then tie, the performance of the police chief to any salary increases. So we'd use a rather generic form and go through it, and it would be a time to just have a healthy conversation about issues. So communities do it depending on the size. At the end of the day, still an odd duck. You don't have to do it. There's no writing you have to. It just comes down to whether or not it's a practice you want to put in place and how detailed that has to get. It can be a simple form. The city uses other forms more related to self-evaluations, and then just sort of giving an overall, meets or exceeds expectations, or all of that. So you can change and do whatever you want, but it's oftentimes better to have a conversation than to write things down. I think that's healthier as well, but certainly we can refine things. But
Yeah, and I think, this commission historically has always had very good relationships with the city administrator and the city attorney.
Yep.
So if there are issues, I would hope that those issues would be relayed to you folks from them, or from them, from you folks to them, or vice versa. So certainly, that can continue if we don't want to go down, when I brought this to you, I just kind of wanted to have discussion about it and see if we were thinking we wanted to go that way or what we wanted to do. Again, looking in the future, but certainly if it's something you just want to pause and pump the brakes on a little bit, that's certainly acceptable. And I can do some more research and find out what I can find out. And I would just encourage you again to have, continue to have those open discussions with the city attorney and city administrator and the mayor. If you ever have any concerns or anything pops up, we can certainly do it that way for now too.
That may be a good idea, maybe Adam, now that, first time you saw this, right? Yeah, maybe Adam can input back what he would be looking for, and this may be it, I don't know, I don't do, my secretaries.
we got a good one on you too.
Yeah, exactly.
We're opening this up, let's
See?
do it on
We might as well keep going.
Yes.
Yeah. You can't do anything about me then. So I think a pause is a good idea. Let Bill just see if there's anything else out there in more of a generic sense, because I'm not saying anything's wrong with what you did here, Jim, I'm not being critical. I'm just, what's the aim, what's the goal? And if we limit it to the people we talked about, what are you gonna get back? This, I don't know that I could say I'm giving you a lot back.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. My input would be pause, put the brakes on this a little bit. Let me do some more checking, let's have some more.
So I think what we're hearing is that the idea of an employee performance evaluation is a good idea, and also limiting it to the police commission and the administrator, mayor, and city attorney. But in what form that would be is up for discussion.
Yep.
So if we do decide to continue with this process and we come up with a form, do we need to get like the blessing from our HR rep for the city or whatever, so that so we know we're not asking some questions that we're not supposed to ask?
So we'll review it, it won't be anything wild, so, I mean, we'd allow whatever you come up with, as long as it's within reason.
So would you recommend that it gets tabled, or would you recommend that they take no action on it tonight?
I'd say tabling it would be perfect. We know what the chief's gonna do. Obviously, it's driven in part by the chief saying this is a good idea, the city administrator suggesting it'll help him in the future, and I think Bill's comments were right on. We've been blessed, but we don't know the future. And the idea that we put in place some kind of mechanism to head off problems is really what we're doing here, by having the police commission involved in some kind of perfunctory review of the chief.
It might be important to have that track record in place, or reviews while we are still blessed, if you want to.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly,
yes.
exactly. That was Bill's point, and I like it. So, yeah, I think a motion to table,
No motions were made.
that's true. So, and no actions taken.
Right.
Move to the next meeting.
Item 6 is other matters.
I'll just mention real quickly, we have an officer that will be leaving us. Certainly we thank Officer Brett Melly for his time with us. His last day with us will be on April 13th. He has decided to move on to another department. He has left on really good terms. He's been a fine officer with us while he was here, and we certainly appreciate all that he's done for the department and the community while he's been here and served this department. And just a family decision, and there's an opportunity there that he struggled with and has decided to move on.
How long has he been with us?
He has been here 3 years, 3.5.
Yeah, pushing 400.
Yeah, pushing for him. So he gave us his notification to leave, so we opened up a hiring process. I did make a conditional offer to an officer that's doing some background testing, psych, physical, those type of things this week. So we hope to have that officer for you for your April 10th meeting to interview and for eligibility list requirements. I'll tell you that the hiring pool has been, we've had conversations about this. We've been very fortunate. We haven't hired anybody in over 2 years. We were very fortunate while everybody else was struggling around us. This is the first time in my career, so our application process has been open for a month. We have a grand total of 6 applicants, which is an all-time low, I think, for us. We've never had that few at this point of the application process, so we've modified some of our, in the past, what we would do is we would wait until the very end when it closed, and then we'd start reviewing everything and interviewing. We're not doing that anymore. As soon as we get an application in, and if we like what we see on paper, we're calling those people in and getting them in and doing some interviews right away, so we can try to lock them up. So we were very fortunate on this candidate that will be coming to you. Hopefully, everything goes well this week, hopefully next week or the April 10th meeting.
So it would just be one individual?
At that point, one individual, yep. City council met last night, and in that process, they did vote to approve the funding, or approve the second school resource officer position. The school district met on March 20th, and they also approved that position, so We're starting that process and getting that together, but we'll look at probably a training opportunity if we have an internal candidate, which I've opened up. If we have an internal candidate for that position, trying to get them in the school for the last month of school this year for training, and then full-time in the fall. So we would start the fall year off with the school district with 2 SROs. So we're looking for an officer then to backfill our patrol officer, so we've still got a process going for that. So we'd be adding a 15th officer. That's what the approval was for last night. So that's exciting for us. We've really built a nice partnership with the school district. And we've done a lot of work on that. And so we're very fortunate to have the blessing of both the city council and the school district to move forward with that. Anything else of importance you can think of, Captain? Okay. So that's all I have for other matters.
Okay, are there any other matters to discuss?
The next meeting at 6 PM as well.
April 10th, shooting for 6 PM.
Was there a conflict with this room for that?
I have not checked.
Okay.
Easter Monday, that would be technically. In some worlds, that's also a holiday. That's not most.
I guess plan on this room unless we reach out to you that there's a conflict.
I'll check with Karen tomorrow. Hearing nothing else, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
And a second.
I'll second it.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 701.
Thank you, gentlemen.